Growing numbers of children were being excluded from school before the pandemic, according to the latest government data. And with schools returning to normal, experts are warning that exclusions are expected to spike upwards. It comes as the former Children's Commissioner launches a new initiative to stop what she calls a conveyor belt of vulnerable children leaving school and falling into the hands of gangs and criminals. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
Think about the beginning and the end.
It's not just the children, but also English teacher Daniel, who's learning.
So it's like the witches, they have...
He's decided to take 2 years out of working in mainstream education to join what's called the Difference Leaders programme, teaching in a pupil referral unit for excluded children.
Sorry, go on. Can you explain?
He'll then take back what he's learned so that in the future, schools can try to keep these kids in the system.
For brave Macbeth.
More of that knowledge will help mainstream colleagues to become more preemptive, to spot the signs perhaps of trauma, to identify the risks that young people might experience and try and mitigate those earlier.
Year 10 student Miriam was excluded from 2 secondary schools for disruptive behaviour, but says mainstream schools never explored the root causes of her problems.
If you're happy to explain anything that's wrong at home to your school, that makes life easier, because let's say something happens at home, you come in school, you're upset, and you let all the anger and upset out, then you're happy to go in to learn, you've got a good mindset, everything's fine, and you're ready to get some education in. But if you come in, there's no one to talk to you, there's no support, you go into your lesson, you're not ready to learn, you're still upset from what's going on at home, like there's just no boundaries and there's just nothing going on for the child. Therefore, the child's not going to be ready to learn.
And suddenly they're in the exclusion zone.
Exactly, because they're acting up, but a lot of things start at home. So for a child to have a mentor or for a child to have a support worker, it will help them express what's going on at home.
Computer science teacher Kalpana is also on a 2-year placement with Haringey Learning Partnership.
We have more opportunities to actually have conversations with the children, actually sit with them, where those things wouldn't have particularly happened in mainstream because the timetables are so strict. There isn't any room for actually having those conversations.
Analysis of the most recent Department of Education data shows that school exclusions were on the rise just prior to the first lockdown, up 5% generally, up 20% in primary schools. Now, whilst there's been a lull due to the disruption caused to schools by the pandemic, it's feared that that has also created the conditions for exclusions to continue to rise. The former Children's Commissioner is launching a new commission to look at ways of stopping children falling into gangs, one aspect keeping them in mainstream education.
We know that COVID has dealt a real blow to a lot of those kids. It's meant that the vulnerabilities they've experienced, often at home, addiction, domestic violence, have increased, and a lot of them also aren't connecting back into school. So they're at risk of falling off the radar.
The trends are very depressing. So 4% of excluded young people are likely to get a pass in GCSE English and Maths. And when we look into the longer term, we know that even by age 20, young people still might not have the literacy and numeracy qualifications they need to access the labour force. And therefore, it's no surprise, actually, that these vulnerable young people are much more likely to be criminally exploited, much more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system.
Miriam hopes to buck that trend. She responded to being excluded from school by raising £2,500 to open her pupil referral unit's first library.
Thank you so much to David for coming back today.
The opening this week attended by local MP David Lammy and author Michael Rosen.
I named this library The Library.
Her exclusion was mainstream's loss. How often is that the case? Jason Farrell, Sky News.